Good morning, everyone. My name is Juan Llanos, and I'm here to talk about regulation, how to regulate DeFi for mass adoption, which is a very hard topic. So hard that I do not have answers. I have more questions than answers. It's a very difficult situation, and I will explain why in a minute. And this is what I promised when I signed up for this talk. Take a quick read. So the first part is stating the obvious, right? Regulation is coming to NFTs and DeFi. And the second part, that this is my aspiration for today, which is to call on you to jointly design self-regulating mechanisms for DeFi. Otherwise, regulation will come from outside. So a little bit about me. I've been in fintech for 20 years in New York. I just, last week was my 20th anniversary as an immigrant in the United States. Grew up in Argentina. And obviously, when I saw Bitcoin around 12, 11, I was very interested. I saw that it was very disruptive. And since I was in compliance, I immediately noticed that there was going to be a lot of pushback. So I started writing a blog and started writing for CoinDesk and for Coin Center, pieces that have stood this test of time, I believe, because they are substantively what regulation intends to do. And then over the years, I basically started working for many companies, and I've had the privilege of working with many early entrepreneurs and pioneers, some of whom are listed here. So currently, I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Ripio, a crypto fintech unicorn based in Latin America, starting out of Buenos Aires. So this is what I plan to do today in the next 15 minutes. Let's talk about some simple principles. I'm going to explain regulation and save you $150,000, if you're listening, paying attention. And I'm going to ask some hard questions. Some of them will be well-meaning and will come from a hypothetical regulator persona with good intentions in trying to understand the industry. And other questions will come from the industry with more cynicism. I've been crowdsourcing questions, and I'm going to present them here. And I hope it gets recorded for home. They're long, but I plan to leave them on the screen soon enough. So something that I think I have seen, especially in younger, early adopters, there's a bit of a haste, speed, and lack of depth in thinking, rigor in thinking. So my recommendation in general is to APR, right? Have awareness, perspective, and reflection about things. The other thing that I think is very important is to have what Nick Szabo calls quantum thought, meaning two states in your mind, or a courtroom in your mind, trying to think your case, argue your case, and argue the other side's case at the same time. And that is what Scott Fitzgerald has called first-rate intelligence. So that is what I think should be done, not have an emotional reaction to these constraints, but have a more thoughtful and all-encompassing approach to thinking. So, and the reason this person is here is that there's good and bad people everywhere. There are well-meaning and ill-meaning people everywhere. There are smart people. There are, all kinds of people everywhere, and people change. And we, ourselves, could change, can change, I believe so. And regulators and policymakers also can change. Proof of that is as this guy was a pilot for the Empire and then moved on to the Resistance. Okay, so this is the hardest part. This is what, the reason why you will not need to go to a lawyer, because everything is encapsulated and abstracted here. So if you want to spend more time in getting to the weeds and know things that are completely irrelevant, talk to lawyers. Otherwise, just pay attention to these things. So regulation in general, this is in general, obviously. There are three things that regulators do. They set policy, they supervise, and they punish, right? It's three things. Every regulator around the world does these three things. The policy aspects come from the law, come from Congress, right? They don't set the law, they just do what the Congress tells them to do. In republics, at least. This is how things work in a republic, right? Where there's division of powers. But, so these are the three functions a regulator has. Then there's three types of regulators in general. Again, every time I talk to lawyers, they find 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 17 kinds of regulators. I just encapsulating this for ease of comprehension. So the first type of regulator is a policymaker. These are elected officials. These are the governors of the world. These are the deputies and congressmen of the world, the senators of the world. So these are the most influential people. This is where the targeting, the messaging of our should go, right? And they care about job growth and development and progress and being re-elected, right? That's motivation. And I include in this section of regulation tax policy, fiscal policy, and monetary policy, which has to do with regulating the economy at a higher macro level, right? So I wish we were flipping my other presentation, but this is a PDF. So the other kind of regulator, which everyone calls regulator, is the administrative prudential regulator. So these guys have a stimulative role, right, or objective. These guys, on the contrary, have a preventative or a prudential type of role, and they're just admins. They just do what they're appointed, politically appointed, or professional bureaucrats or public officers. So if you go to talk to them, if you want to see them in conferences, you can be as friendly to Hester Pierce as you want, but she will do what she wants and what she has to do, right? She will not be able to change policy, okay? Hester is a brilliant lady, by the way. So, and the other type of regulator is the police, the Department of Justice, the punitive aspect of regulation, and this is where we get law enforcement, we get the police, basically, and their focus is to catch lawbreakers, right? That's the only thing they have in their mind. It's like Terminator. They just go, and that's their focus. That's what they're paid for, right? Anyway, so these are the three types of regulators and policymakers, regulators, and law enforcement. Stimulative, prudential, punitive. That's all you need to know about how regulation works. Now, let's start discussing the problems and how this is problematic for the world of crypto and blockchain, right? First of all, there's conflicting public policy objectives across these three. One, some people, for example, the prudential regulator cares about investor protection, consumer protection, privacy, confidentiality, right? Things that are good for the industry, systemic risk. They don't want things to destabilize and blow up, right? So, and they care about privacy, but these guys do not. They care about full transparency, right? They're completely the enemies of anonymity and privacy, right? So this is the first part of the first problem. We have a conflicted public policy objective. So which policy does the government or the republic or society, all of us as a society, prioritize? Do we prioritize the civil liberties aspect and the consumer protection aspects of confidentiality and privacy, or do we go full on into a police state chasing criminals? That's something that's happening today, right? And I've been saying that for years on Twitter, right? So, and obviously, privacy-preserving technologies, zero-knowledge proof, Zuko, hi Zuko, all of these technologies will have problems facing the law enforcement aspect, right? So that's problem number one, right? The second problem with regulation is that it's industry-specific, product-focused, activity-based, jurisdiction-dependent, and intermediary enforced. I have coined these 5 monikers so they're easy to understand. I'm going to explain them briefly. Industry specific, we have regulation for food, for aviation, for transportation, for medicine, for financial services, right? So there's a division, a categorical, discrete division there. Product-based, we have regulation for securities, for commodities, for money, for anything, insurance, It's segmented by product, by financial product in this case, and also based on activity. If I do money transmission, if I transmit money, money transmission applies to me. If I issue a security, issuance of security applies to me. If I exchange a security, securities exchange applies to me. If I exchange currency, currency exchange applies to me. That is how regulation works anywhere in the world, okay? So here is, for example, the United States. Very busy table, but this is what I just said, right? Depending on what you do, some regulator has jurisdiction over you, right? If you're issuing a token, the issuance of a token has to meet the requirements of a specific kind of token. If it's a security token, a currency token, or whatever, right? Stablecoin token. So that is very important to understand. And I hope it was frozen for the slide was frozen. And then we have the new verbs, the new actions that have come up recently, which are things that are crypto native, things that had not contemplated in regulation. No one has ever thought of staking. No regulator ever in the history of humanity has ever thought of staking. It's not written in the law. How do we deal with it, right? So clone, delegate, mint, burn, all these are things that are crypto native. So that is another challenge for this regulation. So, and then jurisdiction, every country has their own jurisdiction, their own policy, their own laws and regulations, and they're not interoperable. Nations are not interoperable today. We want them to be, but they're not, right? So, and contrast all this with the decentralized paradigm. What do you see? Is it compatible? Is there a mapping of everything that the meat space wants and crypto space wants? No, it's completely incompatible, right? So we have that problem. We have the problem of incompatibility between regulation and blockchain. And then we have another problem, which is enforcement. The enforcement part of the mandala, whatever. So that part is very subjective and discretionary. Meaning, sometimes there's one person that decides to enforce the actions, decides to go after one target and not another. So it's very selected and it's vicarious, it's indirect. It's done through financial services. So anyway, and that enforcement today is done through banks, through financial institutions. The unbanking problem, here is where it comes from. It's vicarious. So this is the questions that regulators have. They're very valid questions. They cannot control it, and they're very worried, right? And this is also something that they see, and we see ourselves if we are having the courtroom in our mind, right? We have a lot of immaturity in organizations, and we have a lot of value at risk, don't we? We have to be honest about that, right? And we have rug pulls, we have exit scams, we have all these things that are very concerning to society. So the problem is, or the concern in general is, if DeFi are manageable, right? So here are some questions. I'm going to leave this here. These are questions. I hope they're being put on screen. And these are questions that a well-meaning regulator will ask of us, the industry. Read one, and you'll realize that it makes sense, right? Here's another set of questions that a well-meaning regulator will ask. How do we enforce our laws without third-party intermediaries? It's impossible, right? If everything is a robot, an autonomous machine, how do we enforce our laws? Something has to be done. So here are another one, a busy one. This is the Republic, right? The other one was the Empire. This is the Republic. These are questions from the Republic, right? Crowdsourced from many people throughout the years, right? How can we achieve the goals of prudential regulation, meaning protecting consumers' rights, investor protection, consumer protection, and also without creating a central databases, right? The Financial Action Task Force wants us to identify every transaction and every sender and recipient of a transaction in crypto. That means that we now have full transparency on the blockchain and full identification. What do we get with optimizing that? 1984, George Orwell's 1984. That's what we get. Is that good for society? We have to think about it, and we have to make them think about it. So these are questions that the industry should be asking itself, or should we be asking regulators? We should be asking regulators. We are asking regulators, right? So are you aware that the proliferation of clandestine marketplaces is directly correlated with heavy-handed and discretionary enforcement? That's a kind of cynical, hard question to ask, but it's a valid question. And finally, this is also a valid question. Why is a Tinder swindler not in jail? I mean, have you thought about that? The guy is everywhere in the world as a criminal, and he's still, you know, riding jets and driving Ferraris. I mean, he's obviously a swindler, a lawbreaker. You know, no one cares. And we have the same in Argentina. We had just a huge Ponzi scheme that was never stopped by the government. People were being duped into buying something that was obviously a lie. No one reacts. So law enforcement is being ineffective. So here's the inspiration I have got in my last 2 minutes, right? So this is what I've been researching for years now. So how, again, we're trying to think in a balanced way, trying to think about the needs of the marketplace and the need of society, meet space, and the needs of the industry. So one of the first things I found is this wonderful essay by Tim O'Reilly, where he talks about focusing on outcomes, forcing our regulators to focus on outcomes and not on bureaucracy, which is the perpetuation of the means over the ends, right? So let's focus on desired outcomes, measure things, do adaptive algorithms, and do deeper analysis, which is what I'm trying to say here. Another piece of research I've followed is US Ventures, I don't remember his name, but he's saying, why don't we trade off permission to operate for data? We have plenty of data in the crypto space, right? Why don't we give the state data so they can monitor us, or why don't we monitor ourselves, right? And then we also get permission. Obviously, Nick Szabo, right? Wet code and dry code. Why don't we create systems and mechanisms? Also, Vinay, he has been kind of philosophizing about these things that are coming into play now with zero-knowledge proofs and other things that are being automated. So self-regulation by design feature in crypto economics, to me, is what you guys, the industry geniuses, have to focus on. If we don't do that, someone's going to do something about it. Someone is going to come up with a regulatory framework that will not be friendly to crypto economics. So what I've seen here, this is my 3 findings here in this incredible space. Foresight Institute, follow them, they're doing excellent work. There was Benjamin Diggles that did a great presentation yesterday about collaborating with the state, and obviously zero-knowledge proofs. So here is what my recommendations to you. I'm finishing now in the next 15 seconds. And, but this is my advice to you. Gray hair, 20 years in fintech, experience, the name men give to their mistakes. I have a lot of experience. And I work in this crypto space because I'm passionate about it. And I'm very thankful and acknowledge the generosity of the Ethereum community. It's incredible, but you have to do something about it. And you have to work on both sides of the API, the technology side and the human side, right? Thank you very much.